Hey, how's it going? Hey, do you remember those puzzles that you would get when you got the big variety book and there was crosswords and cryptograms, and there was always that page or two where you had the mixed up drawings that were in a grid system, and then when you copied what was in the grid into the right order, it would make an image. And that's basically what we're going to do with a photo or a drawing. This saves you the time from having to run out to Kinko's or FedEx to enlarge a photo or a drawing. And then I thought, why don't we start with this little needle felt that I had showed you last week? And what if I wanted to make this guy bigger so that it was like a whole cloth quilt that I could applique on, or I could paint on, or we could even use these individual pieces that we're going to section out as applique. So that's the other great reason to use the freezer paper. So here is the original photo that I took while my husband was driving. I pushed him back and leaned over and grabbed this photo with disgusting bugs and the steering wheel and everything. I mean, as soon as you're inspired, make sure you have your camera with you and take those photos, because you could do all kinds of great stuff. When I did my needle felting, I actually just copied the photo right from my phone, and I was just kind of playing around. And it's easy to do when you're doing sort of the same scale. You can sort of just look from your picture to what you're doing and copy what you see. But it's a little bit harder to grasp the correct scale when you're enlarging the drawing. So what you want to do first is take that photo. I'm assuming it's digital, and if it's not, you can scan it in and it could be digital. And crop it down. So obviously I'm cropping out the steering wheel and I'm cropping out the bugs. No, I can't crop out the bugs, but I'm cropping out the dashboard, and I'm just getting a nice image. I have printed that image out now to a, this one's an 8 and a 5.5. Now you could do this with just the regular image if you don't know how to go through like Pixelmator for Mac users or Photoshop. There's a lot of cool filters that you can do, but you could do this right from your photo too. You're basically just going to take your Sharpie and section out different chunks. So if you have a program like EQ7, which is a quilt design program, or Photoshop, you can put your photo in there, crop it down to the size you want. Like I said, this one is an 8 by 5.5. You would run a filter through it, and those two programs, I believe, have a filter called Posterize. And when you place that filter on and just choose that option, it's really simple. You will be able to see an image where the color blocks are sectioned out. So those are easier to trace around. It's not essential to do that, but it does help. I used Pixelmator, and there's not a posterize option, but there's a solarize. Okay, so here is that posterized or solarized image that I printed, and this is 8 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall. So first thing you want to do is just go ahead and take your Sharpie and start outlining some of these shapes, just like this. I'm working upside down, and it doesn't matter because really I'm just focusing on the shape, so it's not even like you have to worry so much about getting everything really perfect. You're focusing on taking the color blocks. So there's a ton of colors going on here. I'm really just trying to hit the big ones. The smaller details, the great thing is you can decide what you want to do with those on your actual art piece, whether you're going to use these as applique or whether you're going to just put this on a canvas background or a muslin background, which is just cheapy old white cotton, and then trace the lines, and then you can decide what to do with it. A lot of these can be applique pieces that you would actually put right on the quilt. They could be sections where you would paint. This is how I would work a collage. Here's one that I did of my sons. This photo was a few years ago, and I really just wanted to try my hand at portrait work. I had done one once before, and I thought I want to try with my kids. Honestly, now I'm getting too detailed in here just because I'm sort of rambling on, but that's okay. You know, you can also decide what you want to copy during the copying phase. So right now we're just pulling colors. You can see I'm just very willy-nilly about this. No big deal. Some branches. We're just getting the skeleton of it, the outline, so that when we play with our piece of art, we are playing with the correct scale and not worrying about any details whatsoever. So you can see you easily could do this with just a regular photograph where you haven't even run it through a filter. It's just so much easier with that filter. The other thing you could do too, if you don't want to be swayed by color, is just make it a black and white photo, and that way you're just picking out the value pieces. That works as well. And then, you know, we talked about doing this from a drawing as well. Well, that's really easy. The drawing is already done for you. This is just an extra step if you've got a photo that you're trying to recreate. But with a drawing, you can skip this section on pulling out your colors because you just have a drawing, if that makes any sense. That's probably good enough. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to divide this into either squares or rectangles, depending on the math. So this is an 8 by 5.5 inch photo, and let's say I want to blow it up 2.5 times. So what I would do is I would take the 8, the width of it, and times 2.5 is 20. And then I would take 5.5, which is the height of it, times 2.5, which is 13.75. So that would ultimately be the size of the image that I'm going to go for, is 20 by 13.75. So every inch of this photo would represent 2.5 inches on a bigger graph. So I'm going to draw that out on freezer paper, and then I'll show you how to divide this all up. So as I was getting ready for this next segment and I was gridding this out, I realized that I had misspoken. This is not a 5.5 inch tall, it's a 4.5 inch tall. So it's okay, I redid the math. So I cut the freezer paper 20 inches, so that's 8 times 2.5 by 11.25 inches, which is 4.5 times 2.5 is 11.25. Super easy math. I've taken a piece of freezer paper and I've gridded it out, and you can see that at the top here I don't quite have, I've got 2.5 inches across because that's divisible by 20, but it's not divisible by 4.5. So I've got this little section up here, but that's okay because I've got a little section up here. So it's all to scale. It doesn't have to be exactly even on these sides. So you can work with, funky sizing if you want to. It's easy to get distracted by the colors in here when you're tracing from here to your big image. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of transparency paper. You could also place this inside of a page protector and do it that way, where you're going to grid out what you did on the photo, and then you can take and trace the lines that you had already done. All right, so I'll finish that out, and then I'll take the photo out, and then it'll be much easier to work with our enlargement without having to be distracted by all of this color in here. Okay, so I've got my transparency here, and it's got all of the lines that I traced on my original photo. So now all you have to do this with a pencil because there will be erasing opportunities, I can assure you. But what is in this little 1-inch box we will put in this 2.5 inch box. This is just blue tape under here just to hold this in place. But so I'll start with this line here, and I'll just kind of come over here. You know, it looks like it's about maybe a fourth way up. And don't be so crazy about this has got to match exactly. It doesn't. These are just, you know, we're just laying out a landscape here. Okay, now I'm going to go across with this line. And this gives you good practice on contour drawing. See, that line doesn't even look anything really like that, but it's okay. It doesn't really matter. We're just really trying to get the scale of what we've drawn. Okay. And then this little guy's kind of outcropping into this photo, so we're going to make that little, see that little guy right there? We've made it right here. And we've made, so this little section here, maybe I want that to jut out a little bit more this way. No biggie. You just erase it. Because we're going to go through all of this with a Sharpie again later anyway, so that we can really have a great dark drawing to work with. Okay, so that's a pretty easy one. Now this one next door, so I'm just going to focus on what's in here, this little 1 inch square. There is a continuation of this line, so of course, easy enough, we would just follow the line where we were and maybe stop it. We're going to make this little shape. You don't have to know how to draw really well. You basically just have to know how to make a shape. I know everyone watching can do this. Little kids did this. I've been doing these since I've been like 6 and 7 years old. It's really easy to be overwhelmed, but that's this whole point of doing this, is we're breaking it down into small little sections. Like any project that looks overwhelming, you just break it on down. This is why my concept of quilting, you just break it down. We can all manage little sections, but we're just starting small. This even this 20 by 11 is not a big piece, but it would be hard, I think, for most people to look at a photo from their phone or a picture and then transfer it over. So this is such a great way to do this. And it also, the other thing about it is it gets you thinking about what is actually in your image. You get to, you know, rather than taking it over to get it copied and enlarged, you're really looking at what is going on in your photo, and that helps tremendously get in your mind what it is that you want to do with this photo and where the landscape pieces are, and it really matters. It makes a big difference. Okay, so continuing on in this. Now see, I've got this I know is outcropping, so I'm just going to continue with this line. And this doesn't go all the way out to the edge, see, so I know to just stop it here. And you have to remember, these are just little bushes. They're not, it's not like it's anything where people don't even know what you're drawing. You know, you're just trying to enlarge this. See, now this could have been a little higher up. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I think it's worth erasing and making it a little higher up. Anyone could do that. So this is what I'm saying about using a pencil first. So if you're nervous about doing this, please know it's not anything that can't be undone or redone. It takes some time, but not any more time than it does to get in your car and drive over and deal with crowds and traffic and people and yuck. So why not do this at home? Anything you can do at home. You don't need all that, all their electronic stuff. I say that, but I did use electronics to posterize this photo. But you don't need it. I mean, if it's there, make it easy, but you don't need to. It's not anything you need. It just takes practice. You guys can do it. Okay, so I think you get the idea. Now I'm in block 3. I think I've done everything in block 2. Oh, I think I've got a little bit more to do here. Hang on a sec. Let's get that drawn in. This line kind of looks like it does this action. This will give you confidence too in drawing, honestly. Okay, so now I've got this little thing. I'm in this square here. I'm going to focus on this 1 inch square. Let's go from this top line, and we'll continue it down. That's great. This line will continue. And we've got this piece coming in here. Kind of looks like it's like our river. Alright, so just continue along and pretty soon we'll have this whole thing filled out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to trace over it with a Sharpie. Now when you go ahead and trace over it with a Sharpie, you no longer need the grid lines. So don't trace your grid lines onto the ultimate drawing. You just want those Sharpie lines. Okay, so I'm working along here and I'm thinking to myself, oh, you know what? It might be easier if you take a file folder and cut a little 1-inch square out of it. And that way then you can move it along and focus just what's in that square. You can move it to the next and you can see where that could be really helpful. So I just took a piece of file folder and cut a square, a 1-inch square out of it, and that's my little frame. Okay, so that might be a helpful hint for you. So here it is, all done out and traced with a Sharpie. And so, you know, when you look at it, it doesn't look like much, but it definitely resembles a river and trees. And, you know, you can follow the photo to place the colors in each shape. You might be wondering why I traced or I outlined the photo shapes first, and then I went to the clear. And the reason I do that is because that way when I'm working with a shape or coloring in a shape and I look at the photo, it's an easy reference if the photo's outlined as well. Otherwise you might be kind of struggling to find it. It's an extra step, but it might be worth taking the time to do that because I think it'll save you time in the long run. This is a really fun way to use scraps to doing a collage quilt. I read Susan Carlson's book, Serendipity Quilts, and learned how to glue pieces of fabric down within the shapes. Here's a picture of a hummingbird I did based on this Susan Carlson method of collage quilting. So I enlarged it the exact same way with a pencil and a paper and a grid. And that was really easy to just fill in, and all of those little pieces of fabric are glued down, and then I free motion quilted over it, the whole thing. And the other thing you could do, is especially this is on freezer paper, is make another tracing of it so that you have it, but then you could cut each individual shape up and use that as fused applique, and just make a whole applique scene. So there's a lot you can do with being able to blow up a drawing that you've done. Thanks again so much for joining me today and the past few weeks. I've had so much fun sharing some of the techniques that I use to make my art pieces, and I hope that you can employ some of those too. In this crazy world that we're living in, and in these crazy times, it is important to speak up in what you believe in, but it's equally as important to take at least one day a week to stay home, stay in the moment, reflect, reset, breathe, create, and just take time for yourself, because it's really simple to get lost in all of what is going on. I'm going to take a few weeks off. Having said all that, I've got a big project that I need to finish, and then the beginning of March, my husband and I have been accepted into the Climate Reality Leadership Training Program here in Denver. It's Al Gore's project, and so we'll be able to see him speak and really get inspired and learn about all the different ways that we can save our planet and make Earth really beautiful. There's a lot of different ways we can be conscious of our carbon footprint as individuals, and I believe that the first way to do that is to just take some time for yourself and enjoy your own creative freedom. Nobody can take that away from you. Your individualism, and it gives you time to reflect and meditate and really scale down what it is you believe in. So I'll be back in March, and until then, I wish you peace, love, and creativity.